Do you really need a financial advisor? Nope. You really don't need one. Now, there's a reason we're in business. I'm a certified financial planner. There are situations where I will advise against hiring us when it does not make sense to, meaning I would actually recommend you do not pay us because it will not add value to your life. It doesn't make sense. There are other situations where it does make sense, where I find we can add value. So for anyone that says, oh my gosh, everyone needs an advisor, I just don't agree with that. That's like saying everyone needs surgery. I don't think so. I'm feeling great. Now, I've had a surgery before because I'm a soccer player, and I'm very grateful because now I feel great and I can play soccer. And if I didn't have it, I would have been miserable, but I don't need it right now. So I'm going to go through a few examples to give you some insight so you can really determine, does it make sense to hire an advisor or does it not? And I'm very transparent about this because my parents were burned by 4 financial advisors. Now, they weren't burned in the sense what money was stolen, but burned in the sense that it wasn't optimal. Many of you know the story, but they started at one firm that was a big household name. My parents were great at making money. They are great at making money, but they're not the best financial savers, let's just say. And that is the reason I eventually became an advisor. But they weren't natural savers. They were really amazing parents who gave me all the lessons and as much as I really needed. I'm trying to think of the words here, but you can see it's just they gave me so much. I'm just eternally grateful. And I had a great life. At the same time, they're working in their 70s, and if it was up to them, they'd probably not work to the same degree. So all of this to say, they started this one firm, and it was okay. The advisor was a nice person. My mom resonated with them, but they weren't getting great financial advice. So they decided to move on to a new advisor. And this story is pretty crazy. But my mom's from the San Fernando Valley. My dad was a journalist. He grew up in Long Island in New York. They met at a conference in Las Vegas. They hit it off. My mom and dad went to a AAA baseball game for their first date. They've now been married 30 plus years. I'm one of 3 boys, and we have an awesome family. But at one point, my dad, who's a big surfer, and if you look up any of their movies just for fun, my last name is Taublieb, so taubliebfilms.com. That's where you can see all the movies they made. My dad was one of the creators of the X Games. My mom and dad have won multiple Emmys. They create movies together. They made The Vow, which is a famous movie with Rachel McAdams and Channing Tatum and ESPN 30 for 30s and some cool stuff. Don't always pay very well, but some cool stuff. And so I naturally am coming from this media background. That's why I love doing everything I'm doing now. All this to say, they were going, hey, how are we going to live our best life? And my dad was like, well, I'm going to surf. So my dad said, we're moving to Malibu, California. And my mom's like, I don't know if we can afford that. And my dad's like, I don't really care. Like, this is where we're going to live because I want a certain beach key so I can surf certain waves. And to be fair, my dad had an amazing life at this home where we currently live. And my mom loved the weather. So it worked out for both of them. My dad wasn't just saying, here's what we're doing and I'm the boss by any means, because my mom is the boss. We all know that. Now, my dad is not a big walker, but my mom is. So my mom's walking on the street one day and my mom runs into Barbara Streisand, the singer, literal Barbara Streisand. And my mom hits it off with her. And my mom's like, Barbara used to buy cookies from my son when they had their lemonade stand and cookies, and that's so nice of you. And they hit it off. And Barbara said, hey, Susan, if you want a financial advisor, it came up naturally. She didn't just say this, okay? Because if you want a financial advisor, because my mom was being very honest about finances at that point, you can speak to my advisor. And my mom comes home going, oh my gosh, I remember it to this day. She didn't know I was there, but she was telling my dad, you'll never believe it. Barbara said we could speak to their financial advisor. We just fired our last guy. This is going to be amazing. And it was awful because Barbara's advisor works with people that have 20 trillion, gazillion, jillion dollars. That's not my parents. So my parents got terrible advice and very little attention. Barbara did not have malicious intent here, but this is the reality of the situation. So then what happened is my parents were like, well, I don't know what to do. I now need financial advice. At one point, they had an advisor that they actually liked at the low-cost firm many of us know, but that advisor then started to hit them up less and less and less. And they're like, what's going on? Like, why are we not getting proactive guidance like at the beginning? And what happened is that advisor was trying to do their best work, but a different advisor at that firm quit. So guess where all of that advisor's clients went? my parents' advisor. So now my parents' advisor is trying to manage so many different people that they can't possibly provide good service. All that to say, now my parents are like, well, what are we supposed to do? So now I manage my parents' finances. They work here at Root. They're clients here at Root. They don't work here. That would be weird. But the reason I bring this up, honestly, is my parents are the type of people that are like, hey, I want to delegate to professionals. I will gladly do that. We make movies. We don't want someone telling us what to do. We'd rather pay for good guidance. And they never really got optimal guidance. And it's one of the reasons they're working in their 70s. And if it was up to them, they wouldn't be to this extent. Luckily, they like what they do. But for all of you, many of you, and I know you well because you're watching the videos, you listen to the podcast, you're like, look, I don't know if it makes sense to hire an advisor. And I joke on YouTube that I'm the meanest financial advisor. I promise I'm not mean. I'm just very transparent. But many of you think you're amazing investors, okay? That's just the truth. You're like, I've got a few $1,000,000. I've saved and invested so well. That would be like me saying, I'm an amazing mechanic because I know how to put gas in my vehicle, okay? I'm not an amazing mechanic by any means, but I want to make sure we're being honest with our skill set. And the skill set to get to retirement is very different from the skill set in retirement. In retirement, you choose how you create your income. There's tax strategy, there's estate planning, there's insurance, there's withdrawal strategy, there's healthcare, there's dividend income. There's so many different ways to create an optimal retirement. Not saying one's better than the other, but there's so many different ways that most people are like, hey, I think I've invested well, but it's this other stuff that I'm missing. The tax and the healthcare and the withdrawal. So right now, many of you who have an advisor, you've shared, hey, that's kind of what I'm getting today is they're telling me to rebalance. They're telling me, hey, I should just save more. Like I could figure that out. Do I really need to pay for that advice? In many instances, I'll say, I don't know. It doesn't sound like it's worth it to me. But when it makes sense to hire us is generally when someone's 1 to 5 years out from retirement and they want to make sure that they are preparing properly to optimize. That's why most people pay us. When I ask them, and I'm very honest, as you know, I'll say, why are you paying us? And why are you paying us so much money? Most people say, the first year, it's really the tax strategy that I need to dial that in, and the estate planning, we've been meaning to get to it, but we don't know what kind of trust we need, and the insurance, make sure we're protected, and withdrawals, we've never had to pull from our portfolio. We've only ever put money into it, so now it's pretty scary. And so the truth is, at this point, it's completely different. It's a different ball game. Now, what I need to make sure all of you are doing is you are paying going, wow, my life is better. Because if you're ever paying a fee because you're like, I feel like I should, but really it's stressing me out because I'm thinking maybe I could do this, it's not going to be worth it. You're going to be beating yourself up constantly. So that's the first year, as I'll ask people, and they'll say tax strategy, withdrawals. Those are the main reasons people are hiring us. And then a year goes by, I'll say, why are you still paying us? And they'll say, to be honest, I don't want to have to do it. Like I am paying, so I don't have another job in retirement. Many spouses will say, I'm really excited to redate my spouse because it's been 30, 40 years. They've been working hard. Now we're in retirement. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, my wife's constantly rebalancing and always worrying about tax law and whether or not we need to convert and if the real estate property is doing okay. And so I don't really find I've got my true partner because here they are just taking their traditional job and switching it for the retirement advisor job. So all of this to say, when does it make sense to work with an advisor? Most people are paying us so that they have a true partner. There's the third party that having an objective is, of course, objective third parties really helpful. Having an advisor that you know is going to give you the honest truth. Having an advisor that you can trust so that when you're traveling, you're not worrying about, should I be converting more? Or what estate plan do I need? Having an advisor that's going to not just be brutally honest and transparent, but it's going to force you to say, hey, here's the reality. You can be spending more. I don't want you to regret being 75 with $12 million or whatever it is at that point. I want to make sure that you know you're on track. Someone who can calm you down and make sure you understand when markets are volatile, that it's a part of investing and not just, hey, be smart and stay disciplined, but hey, here's how we're going to change things in retirement based off of what you've shared with us as your goals. And at the same time, what I find is, once again, the ultimate value is that you don't have to do it. You're paying for your time. So do you need it? No. Would you have potentially less money in your portfolio by hiring an advisor? Potentially. Now, there are many episodes I've put out with myself as well as my partner James where we talk about when it does make sense to add quantifiable value, meaning if you hire an advisor, that you would make more money. Therefore, if you're paying 1% and you're receiving 3% in value, well, that's simple math and a no-brainer. But there are situations where people will pay us our fee, and in that year, financially, on paper, their portfolio decreased because markets didn't do well, but we did great tax strategy or saved them on healthcare or allowed them to sleep better at night through an example, or we helped them determine optimal Social Security collection. I know I just said Social Security poorly, but you get my point here. So there are situations where it's not exactly, wow, I'm quantifying A for Z, if that makes sense. And if that's who you are, if you're the type of person that's like, well, I'm not gonna be able to sleep at night knowing there's a chance I could have done it. Well, you're going to beat yourself up paying us the fee every single month. So I want to be very honest about it. You are ideally paying an advisor, so you have a trusted partner who ideally can make you way more money through good planning. But at the same time, that's someone who is, even if markets are down, they are going to be there for you to help. And I would even argue people look at it completely in the wrong direction in certain instances where they legitimately just stop and go, well, why would I pay an advisor when I could do it myself? Well, we could do that argument all day. It's why would you ever go out to eat? You could make food yourself. Maybe you're going out to eat because you get one-on-one time with your partner when normally if you're at home, you're cooking and they're on the couch. A conversation might not come up that otherwise would have been really impactful, would have been meaningful. There's so many examples. I'm not going to bore you to death. But what I encourage you to do, if it's of interest, this is our free community. So if you don't mind, look right here. I will ask clients, I'll say, why did you join Root? If you're a current client, would you please share these 4 things? How did you first find Root? Were you hiring Root as your first advisor, or were you coming from another firm? Which advisor do you work with at Root? And then why did you ultimately join Root? How has the experience been so far? And then I said, bonus, I speak to so many people who hire advisors for different reasons. What's one word to describe your experience so far? And you can see people are very transparent. I mean, here's someone, AZ mode. I found Root just looking for retirement guidance I wasn't getting from my current advisor. My previous advisor was great at growing my assets, but they lack Social Security or healthcare or tax strategy. And you can see this person works with Chelsea here and is so glad for the following reasons. The word she chose is freeing. No more head trash or unnecessary worry. I already feel like Root is my family. There's other people here. They say, I love that you freely share very helpful info with everyone. You explain concepts thoroughly. You're authentic. It's clear you're passionate. I had an advisor before that I had fired a few months earlier because after 4 years, they still only knew enough about me to apply a cookie cutter solution. I was flying solo for a bit, but I didn't want to sign up with just anyone. She shares who she's working with and that she's been great. Once again, Social Security, tax strategy, long-term care. The word she chose is confident. There's literally hundreds of examples here. The most recent one, as of this one, is, we were this person's third advisor. They're working with Brandon. They found me through the podcast. They like the comprehensive no cookie cutter approach. So there's certain examples here that I like that people are very honest about because, and I'll share this one refreshing here. This person says, hey, we're new to Root. After watching YouTube videos by Ari and James, I talked to my husband and I asked him to watch a few. We're coming from an advisor who has not offered these services. We chose Steven, and during our first meeting, I watched my husband light up and take more of an interest. Well, that's a perfect example of something that's not exactly quantifiable. Steven spoke plain English. My husband really understood what we're doing, that we're going to have guidance we need to retire successfully. An instant weight off of our shoulders. So there's obviously a lot of different examples in here. Check it out. See if there's one that you go, well, that feels more like me. It seems like these are people that are different, and don't just hire us because of someone's an Eagles fan. But most people you could see are joining us who are from a traditional advisory relationship from certain firms. So certainly make sure to check all of this stuff out. You can see a lot of different pieces of advice here. This is the last one I'll leave you with. This person, George Dancy, says, my brother pointed me to the YouTube content by Root and another firm. I've been invested with TIA since the late 1980s and dabbled with Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab. I had TIA before. I was missing something, couldn't figure out what it was. After watching several videos, I finally understood what I was looking for. The content was informative, it was compelling, add that to the helpful content. I knew I wanted to work with them. The holistic philosophy impressed me, and for advisors as young as they are compared to me, they understood what I needed more than I did. I joined them because they were not just focused on growing the portfolio, but reminding me that the funds are a tool that I should use to enjoy. And they're keeping me on track to ensure I don't over or underindulge. It is truly freeing to trust someone else to manage the assets. So there's so many different reasons why you should or should not work with an advisor, but I do believe in being very honest about all of those reasons because I find our industry lacks that in many ways. So you can see here under our FAQ section, I tried to put together as many potential questions you might ask. So what can we expect if we work together? What does the process look like? Give me an overview. What happens after I start? Who do we work with? Do I have enough money? Do I have to hand over everything? Do we have to commit long term? All of these come with videos that are very clear on how they all work. How do we charge? What is it we like to do? Who do we help? What are our services? Tax planning, you guys know, but this is the big one here. We help clients with conversions and harvesting and charitable and healthcare and income, but not on their own, in coordination with your goals. So make sure you're checking this out to see if this is of interest. And then if so, you can click this little button here, see if you're a fit. And if it makes sense from there, we'll get to have a conversation to see if it makes sense to partner with one another. So that is it for today's video. Hopefully you recognize that it does make sense to hire an advisor. There are instances, as well as there's times where it doesn't make sense, where it's just about timing. Not to say it never makes sense, but you want to make sure it's in your best interest, where you're doing it going, wow, Root is going to make my life better. That's it for this video. See you guys next time.